Welcome to the Tech Insider podcast. I'm your host, Nick Hume, founder of Hume Consulting, specializing in digital infrastructure, next-gen cooling solutions, and technical diligence. Tech Insider will discuss leadership, strategy, and technology trends with leading industry executives all around the world. In today's episode, I sit down with Rob Coyle. Rob is the Community Technical Program Manager at the Open Compute Project, OCP. The Open Compute Project is a collaborative community focused on redesigning hardware technology to efficiently support the growing demands of compute infrastructure. We chat about the future of compute, sustainability, and obviously 5.25-inch floppy disks. Enjoy. Thanks for joining us. It's awesome to have you on, and we caught up, I think last week, just to sort of, get ready for this thing, and I think we could have recorded that honestly, because it's just I enjoy talking to you. Wealth of information, but thanks for joining us on the Tech Insider podcast, Rob.
Oh, I appreciate it. Likewise, the time slipped by. I think we had a little bit of time, and I was like, "Oh yeah, one more thing. Oh yeah, one more thing." So, it's a lot of fun.
Well, it was good because I was a little slow. I wanted to do my OCP regional wrap, so I did that for the Global Summit, and obviously wasn't able to make it to Lisbon and head over to Europe and check it out. But I got to spend a little bit of time. It's obviously a smaller conference.
Mhm.
I looked at the videos. You can kind of go through them, and they're published a couple of weeks after the event, and sort of sitting through those. And there's a lot of cool announcements, updates, progress. It just always grows. The volume, the innovation there. Like, what was? Did you have any kind of specific things that you saw there that were interesting for you? That were updates that were really material or brand new things that you guys are working on?
Yeah, it's really exciting, and like you said, we're growing. It's hard to be in all the places at once. So I'm a bit of a generalist in the tech scope. So I don't have a hyper focus like I've had in the past in my career. So I want to see what's happening in liquid cooling. I want to see what's happening in memory. I want to be on the expo hall floor looking at new product. So it's neat. I saw your recap, which was a reflection on some of the videos that we had published, which is neat to see it and kind of experience it through our attendees' eyes a bit.
Mm.
Though you did it virtually, that's what I really love hearing is people's experience at our events as we try and make them better and really tailor them to our audience. Europe is a really interesting one because geographically their focus is so unique, even country to country, not just the EMEA region of the world. But when you're in Lisbon, the issues there are different than when you're in the UK or other places. So
Totally.
I had the opportunity to sit down with a couple of our EMEA representatives, Raul, who's there, and others, and kind of learn about like what's interesting to them. We have our American perspective, but I think we've done a really good job of investing in the needs of the immediate audience. So things like building with different materials to reduce carbon. So we had the wooden data center rack in our innovation on the floor. I thought that was,
I forget Carl's last name. I think he's doing the wooden data center over there, and
yeah, Carl Rabe.
that's it, Rabe. I was thinking
Yep.
McRabe for some reason, but Carl Rabe.
Yeah, and it's neat because we've been able to watch that concept move off the paper in OCP inside modular data centers into a rack that now has accessories and components that are built into this wooden structure, and to see it look more like something you could envision being in a data center is really exciting. We had a great contingent from the liquid cooling space. They
Mm.
had a liquid cooling bazaar there, which was a overflown, overpacked, overflowing room. No pun intended on for the liquid guys, but yeah, just so much interest in the needs of an area of our industry that's moving so quickly and trying to tackle all these issues within it. Managing liquids, types of liquids, the content, material compatibility, all those
Sure.
things. Are just kind of getting front row seats to this innovation is really exciting. So those two jump off the page for me. There's lots of others. I definitely recommend people to go and look at your review of it. Also, we're publishing all the talks from the engineering workshops. So if there's a specific subject matter expert subject that someone wants to review, they can jump in and
Awesome.
watch them for themselves.
That's very cool. And just I jumped into the summit without really going into OCP itself. I know a little bit about it. Folks may know different versions of a little bit to a lot. You're an employee there. So tell us about OCP. Like, look, coming from, being in the industry for such a long time of very proprietary, very vendor lock, very closed, source IP and infrastructure and knowledge and, software lock-in, vendor lock, you know, license lock. It's really, I think it's a great way to just break past and break open those existing rules that have been the standard for so long, so that it's a little customer, hostile to some degree. And so the open community and the open nature of what you guys are doing, I believe is going to help in a big way. But tell us about OCP, your role there and how you got involved.
Yeah, thanks for the setup. I guess it's a novel concept from hardware in the data center environment, but we've seen this open model work in multiple areas within the tech industry before and since. So kind of backing up, OCP was founded just about 13 years ago by at the time Facebook, Morgan Stanley, Andy Bechtolsheim, Microsystems, a couple other companies. Rackspace, I believe, is one of the founding companies as well, and essentially looked at the market from the server market was really the focus and said, we need to scale this compute infrastructure in a much more cost effective, much more efficient, sustainable way. And what the market was offering at that time wasn't really going to allow Facebook primarily to reach their goals. And so they kind of solved two problems. One, solve this scaling challenge for Facebook, but then do so in a way by open sourcing the designs for the server hardware and supporting equipment so that the entire market could benefit.
Hmm.
Because if they were facing this challenge, they knew others, and as others join it, it kind of helps everybody, right? So you can commoditize a little quicker, prices come down, and
Yeah.
innovation happens a lot quicker because you have more people looking at it from their perspective. So over the last 13 years, it's expanded from innovations like toolless design servers that have, can be removed vanity free, right? We don't have blinking lights and plastic on the outside, unnecessary pieces in a data center. And it's expanded from there to the rack itself. Now we're into everything from firmware and software applications all the way to the data center facility itself and
Hmm.
everything in between. Today, we're seeing kind of history repeat itself from over 10 years ago with that need to scale, with a need to scale new technology, right? The data center market has been transformed in the last 12 months, or at least what everybody thinks the future might look like, to include things like liquid cooling, GPUs, increased density and compute while reaching these net zero and sustainability goals and doing that at the same time competitively.
Yeah.
Um, it's like they've dumped gasoline on the fire. I mean, things in
Well, they're
open
such
hardware are,
contradictory things, right? Trying to do, be more sustainable than ever, or net zero or net negative, with the literal opposite thing you're trying to do, with the highest heat, the highest power pull in, with inability to sort of scale some of those things, both the supply of that power. It's never been more necessary. It takes a long time to build those things, and
yeah,
then the ability to cool and heat reject those growing 2, 3, 4x power requirements at the chip level. And it's not just one chip, it's every single device in that rack um is doing that same thing. It's more power, more heat, and it's just exacerbating the issue.
yeah, and it's not just one for one, right? We're not taking a rack that was traditionally doing 5 kW or 7 kW and now jumping to 50, 100. I think NVIDIA's new platform is like 125 or so per rack. You're doing that, going up a multiple of 5x or greater.
And then do it
But
again in
you're
two
also
years.
right now we have to build over 3 times as much infrastructure in the next 5 years as we did in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
So it's way more than 1x. So it's a huge issue. Um, Fortunately, we've seen Um, and I kind of talk about how we do that at OCP is we've seen this technology scale quickly and be open sourced. And so I think it's kind of we're looked to in the industry of like, okay, we need to keep doing this in a little bit different way. Um, and we're able to support that. So
Mm.
the Open Compute Project Foundation, which I'm an employee of, is really just a small group of people. We're responsible for supporting our membership, which is over 350 companies. And the employees within those companies, many of them are volunteers within our projects.
Mhm.
The Open Compute Project actually has 12 major categories of projects that it's working on at one time. So we have over about 150 work streams going at one time, from everything from liquid cooling to CXL memory to chip design,
Sure.
chiplets, all sorts of things. So those volunteers are working to collaborate and come out with innovations to market quicker than the traditional proprietary way it's been
Yeah.
done in the past.
So I'm curious how I think that's fantastic. I again, like we were talking before, it's breaking open the IP to some degree, and sort of spreading that goodness across the industry. That the contradiction to that, and I'm curious what how you guys are tackling it is, it's called Open Compute. It's in the title. How, and they're volunteers, folks coming in from Intel and Meta and, Qualcomm and, chip manufacturers, data center companies, memory companies, et cetera, et cetera. So how, how exactly do they volunteer information for the greater good with the capitalistic situation in the companies they work for, and keeping and retaining IP that would otherwise be useful for their own development, their own kind of purposes? Like it feels there's a lot of gray area there. I don't know if there's been any issues or any kind of challenges with, um, that data wanting to be retained versus shared versus other,
Sure.
patents, etc. So I was curious how that plays out.
Yeah, I think that's a common, I would say, misconception
Okay.
about open is that it's all altruistic, right? We're doing it for the greater good. I think that's part of it. But most of these companies are doing it because they're trying to reach their business goals.
Hmm.
They're trying to innovate faster. So, just because you're part of Open Compute Project doesn't mean you're handing over all your intellectual property.
Sure.
You're The way we do that is through agreements that the software industry has been using for a very long time. We actually use the OWF agreements the same way the software industry
Okay.
does. And what you're saying is, I have a specific area of technology or intellectual property I'm willing to share with other companies because it's going to help us achieve something, right? So those companies come to the table together. Maybe it's the hardware manufacturers, like you mentioned, Intel and others. Maybe it's the hyperscale data center companies. Maybe it's Microsoft, Meta, and Google, who are very active participants, saying we all have this common problem. There's things that are proprietary that don't have a lot of value being proprietary. They would have more value if we could work on it together. And each of those companies make their own decisions about what that is and isn't.
For sure.
And so then they work together on those specific scopes of issues so that they're competing on things that make them competitive, not competing on things that are actually holding themselves back. And at a time when the industry is requiring us to innovate faster than ever, the companies that are doing it does help the greater good, but they're also doing it for themselves too.
It's essentially better together and actually faster together, because if I contribute, you contribute, we contribute together, it goes faster. I mean, it's just a parallel task. Um, and so then, I'm curious then, so then how does OCP, you've got, do you essentially then license, like you got ORV3 racks, you've got like all these different standards now. How does OCP monetize that? How does their commercial solution for OCP for you
Yeah,
guys?
so those companies, we're really just the somewhat the caretakers for navigating that IP process.
Mhm.
The OCP doesn't retain the license or come in. We don't own the IP in any way. We don't have any rights to it. What those companies who choose to participate in whatever that piece of intellectual property is they're saying we're willing to share this on an open license for the public, and they do so self-executing that amongst themselves, and then we publish it on the OCP website. In this case, maybe it's a specific piece of intellectual property, maybe it's a design, maybe it's a specification, something like that. And we share that on our database for the public to access. That allows them to share that information with their vendors, their customers, maybe if they're a typical customer to their vendors, so that they can get greater access to a marketplace. More people can participate.
Okay.
That helps de facto standardize an industry. We're seeing it a lot in liquid cooling. We're seeing it in ORV3, which is the open rack version 3 compared to traditional 19-inch hardware. Those are industry standards anyways. I mean, a 19-inch rack is a 19-inch rack for the most part, right? What are we protecting about sheet metal and bends that we couldn't do in an open way collaboratively and move faster? And that's why I think you see a lot of the ORV, either truly ORV3 designs with liquid cooling solutions, either in immersion or direct to chip cold plate. We're seeing imitation of the ORV3 liquid solution by traditional proprietary vendors as well.
Yeah.
So I think the proof's kind of in the pudding.
Yeah. No, that's good. I think well, I was just at Dell Tech World this week, so I just got back yesterday. So there's probably some, bags under my eyes from some long and late nights. But I was curious because a lot of the interest, if you walk around the expo hall, was with the liquid cooling. There was Submer were there, the GRC guys were there. There were the direct chip guys like Zutacore and others. And so, it, you could just see most people milling around those, whether they were doing a presentation or they were just asking a lot of questions. That's an interest of mine, which, I sort of added to the numbers, but it's, I think the same thing is happening. Every other one I've been to, GTC, OCP Global or Supercompute, same thing. There's just this super, interest in what's happening there, because I think it's like we were talking before, it's really obvious that the power's going up, the heat's going up, and there has to be a solution to it. And there's these had previously been novel solutions, and people have been doing R&D in a vacuum and across the globe. And so what I guess we're seeing is, which is great, is that collaboration, is that standardization. And there's lots of small players, and I guess that will just aggregate and kind of consolidate over time, for what the need is, which is essentially to sustainably power digital infrastructure that is going to continue to, it's putting too much strain on the current standards, so you have to create new ones.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think typically does. I think you see those things consolidate, as you said, and either that's through acquisition or someone's, purchasing IP or
yeah,
I think we've seen that's common in the tech industry, right? And I heard this last week. I was at a meeting and we were talking specifically about liquid cooling, which, everybody's kind of hovering around and looking at, and it's very interesting, is that the blast radius, and that's how they describe it, is very big, right? So I think OCP's been around for 13 years doing other things. Maybe the ORV3 rack was probably something that most people were common with because it had a relatively large blast radius, right? The footprint's a little different. It's denser, so it's heavier. So floor loading requirements are different. Hallways have to be different, right? So operationally, this thing looks different, feels
totally.
different, and multiple people have to interact with it, right? Server manufacturers have to interact with it. Operators have to interact with it. Liquid is that plus more.
Mm,
And so the blast radius being, I think you have a lot of people going, how do I do this? Like,
yes,
whether I'm a chip manufacturer, whether I'm a component manufacturer, server manufacturer, and integrator, so many people have to now, like, if you change something in memory, that's only going to impact so many people, right?
totally.
But if you change something in how the server interacts with the environment through heat, right? So now we're not using air, now we're going to liquid. The ripple effect is so big. I think that's why it has so much attention. And there is almost no standards, available to the industry to lean on and say, we're going to use this one. And then everybody kind of falls in line with this industry is so new and innovative that these companies are coming together saying, what's the best way to move forward? And we'll all move forward together quicker. And then we can meet the needs of the market, which are far outpacing, demand is far outpacing supply right now. So let's get it right. Also, the major customers needing to meet those net zero or net negative goals, saying, okay, we're going to build 3 times the amount of infrastructure or more in the coming years than we did in the previous so many years. We really have to get it right. Like, we've learned from our mistakes over the last 10 plus years. We have to really, and I think these companies, at least the ones that are working within OCP, are really doing that. They're saying we're gonna, with the knowledge we have now and working together, we're gonna try and make the best decisions we can, because the impact is going to be so great over the next few years.
Absolutely. And I mean, you're literally rewriting the book because, again, to date or previously, you go and install something and it goes in a rack, and it's very well known, it's very mature, it's decades known, right? The telemetry is the same as it used to be. The processes, the people that are doing it have been doing it for a long time. The blinky lights, and then it's all very standard. You basically disrupt that entire process, and everything changes, to your point. But things like, and it was kind of curious, I was watching some of the videos. I think the Denver team and the Submer team had a co presentation, and you have a spill on whether it's the glycol or the immersion fluid or whatever it happens to be. Like, what's the right tool to clean that up? Like, do you
Right.
use solvent? Do you use this? It's those things. You're bringing liquid into an environment, whatever the liquid happens to be, which is typically the kryptonite of electronics.
Sure.
Depending on how you deal with it, and that just incorporates a huge amount of additional complexity to every single step of a process, including decommission, right? Everyone's just
Oh
get
yeah.
that thing online and install it and manage the upfront. There's an operational cost, and then there's a decommissioning kind of component too that needs to be managed, as well as the sustainability reporting and the safety we just sort of touched on. So it's incredibly challenging, and you're trying to do, to your point, 3, 4, 10x with 3, 4, 10x complexity on
Right.
top, because you're trying to do it at net zero or very sustainably. Everything changes. Your concrete changes. Your racks change. Your just the whole data center layout changes.
Yeah,
Um,
the tools you bring in the data center to manage these things change. How, these cleanup kits or service kits, like, these are all brand new things for a data center. I think what's really neat and unique about being at OCP is we get the perspective of all that. It's not
mm,
just the product manufacturers that say, hey, I have this great thing that removes heat from chips better than anything else on the market, right? And historically, in traditional, vendor, or product providers, that's how it goes. They're the experts in whatever that device or widget is, and they bring it to the market and say, this is the best thing. Um, we get the feedback loop much quicker, because as someone's developing a solution like that, we have the operator saying, okay, great, but what happens when there's a spill? We have the integrator saying, okay, great, but can I rack that at my site and then roll it all the way to deployment, or do we have to do something on site? And as you're developing these solutions, you get the voices of all the people who are going to touch this piece of technology. And so then we come out with things like, and I say we as OCP, we're really just the keepers. Really, it's our community that
mm,
comes up with these solutions, like guidelines and best practices. And those things march right along with the product as it develops, not the product gets developed and then we have to figure out how to use it and then we have to deploy it. Like, we're doing a lot of these things concurrently, whereas historically they were done very sequentially. So
yeah.
I think that's another way, that's another key unlock, I think, that we have at
That's
OCP.
I mean, it'd be very interesting. You would see a lot of a lot, right? You'd see the new stuff, you would see the updates, the challenges, talking to lots of different folks. So it'd be really, really interesting role and kind of function. I'm curious, I think you posted something this week and it said uh go fast. I think it was like, was it go fast?
It
Was that the
was.
okay. So how does OCP go fast? How do you've got the width of that thing you just discussed is wide as, very super wide.
Right.
And there's a lot of things going on, a lot of dependencies, soft, hard, and everything in between. How does OCP go fast if you've got, I guess, volunteers, you've got this, herding, not herding cats, but you're herding a lot of intelligent cats,
Sure.
that are trying to all do the right thing and go in the same direction. Does it need a lot of herding? Does it like how would you go faster? How about that?
Yeah, I mean, we have a structure in place that we manage that's been continually refined over the years, and as we tackle new things, we come up with new things to refine. But we have an just incredible group of volunteer leaders, right? And they're usually senior people within their companies. We have a steering committee that advises us technically. We have volunteer project leads over each of these 12 top level projects, which are segmented in kind of bigger buckets. And then within those top level projects, we have sub projects and work streams. And so, for example, cooling environments is a big, um, uh, broad category, right, of things. And so within that, you have immersion cooling and cold plate and many others, right? A heat reuse are,
Oh,
and so the experts within those very specific areas and in that structure are able to move fast within their own areas of expertise. And then it kind of funnels up to, okay, I have this great cold plate solution. And then the broader cooling environments group gets to look at it. And then the broader OCP group gets to look at it. And so I think the opportunity for just the best idea to bubble up to the top quicker is a way we would move fast. Um, if I were to kind of add a wish list of how we would move faster, um, it is really just,
clone
getting,
yourself and
yeah, multiply myself,
yeah,
and be in all places at once. No,
yeah,
I mean, I don't, the credit really goes to our volunteer leaders. Our team is responsible for the structure. They use it really well. If we had more people who had access to it, we have room to grow. We're growing like crazy. We still do. More people participating will help us go faster. It won't slow us down because those voices help us comb for the best ideas and the best methods and the best solutions, and those inputs from other companies really help us get to these major goals. And Dharmesh Chani from Meta, he spoke on our keynote stage multiple times, big OCP and sustainability champion. I think at our last global, he said, have big, hairy, audacious goals. And these companies do. When they join OCP, it's because they want to go solve things that no one solved for before. And
totally.
so the more inputs they have, I think the quicker they can get to them.
Awesome. So I'm maybe it's interesting to talk about Meta just really, really quickly because obviously founding member,
Mhm.
huge participant and they contribute a lot to OCP. I think the for the public that don't know, because I think most people that would watch this would understand what Meta do and how they contribute and things like that. There's a portion of folks that might listen to this and you might find their way into their ears that see Meta as, Facebook, Instagram, and, just data, uh, funneling,
Sure,
data
they see it through the
processing.
lens of the applications.
That yes, but also I guess the I guess the public perception of privacy kind of less privacy than perhaps what they're sort of, let me put it another way, a lot less privacy than you would expect using your data to harvest and go and do a lot of
Yeah.
analytics and stuff like that. But what's really the opposition to that, or I guess what we're talking about is all of these contributions in other ways that's going to, benefits the greater good, right? Like all these things are kind of pushing forward. They've got enormous amount of compute. They've got enormous amount of innovation that they've done, and they're doing an enormous amount of contributing for other companies to sort of leverage their learnings. I think there's a lot of goodwill in that perhaps not everyone on the planet would know about
Yeah.
relative to their own perception, which is maybe, beat up in the media from the consumer stuff that they've done in the past.
Yeah, I don't know to speak for them, but what I've seen is, when they first did their Prineville, Oregon data center, we can historically look at, and I think that was third party verified that, that data center, when they turned that thing on at the time, was the most efficient data center that had ever been built from
Mm,
a construction standpoint, from an IT material standpoint, from an energy consumption standpoint. And I think that trend has continued. Like they know that moving efficiently and sustainability and go fast, move fast, right? And I think
mm,
the old saying was like move fast and break things. I think
yeah.
they've matured past the break things piece. But they know that the way faster forward is together, and it's evident through their contributions to the open community. Publicly they opened, even the LLM, Llama,
Sure.
and we've heard Mark Zuckerberg say publicly, like, they're very committed to open, not just, and they do it multiple ways, right? They do it with software, their offerings. They do it in other areas beyond OCP. It's really part of the culture there. They've they've done a lot to bring others to the market. We see Google and Microsoft also contributing, and you can go on our website right now and just look at the IP that each of those companies have provided or um, have enabled their vendors to share that information. Like, okay, this is good for us, but if everybody's consuming it, it's good for everybody and it's good for us too. So, I think a lot of these companies, from previously being on the business development side, all these major customers are terrified of vendor lock-in. I mean, we're seeing it right now with NVIDIA, right? They all are
Absolutely.
developing their own technology because, publicly, many people are saying, these companies don't want to be beholden to one vendor. And
Yeah.
that's always been the case. That's been in servers, that's been in racks, that's been, on the construction side, that's contractors. They're not going to pick one contractor and say, we're going to build all our data centers with this one contractor. It's too much risk.
Mm.
And they can't move fast enough. So I think they all see the value in that. And we're just one way that they can avoid that lock in.
Yeah. And just going back to you for a sec as well, because I guess you've got all this, you having all these great discussions and knowledge, sort of visibility into all these different streams. You sort of, talking to Microsoft and Amazon and Meta and others. And then, but that's not been your background, right? Like you've come
Right.
into the data center slash tech slash, industry. But that wasn't sort of where you came from. So how did you kind of make that transition? I'm just curious as to.
Yeah. I joke that I tell everybody that I found the data center through the generator yard. And
Okay.
like that's partially true. I'll get to that. So I started my career. I've been always fascinated with tech, and even if I go back, like I wrote a little piece about why I joined OCP as an employee, but I've been active in the OCP ecosystem for like 5 or 6 years. Is that I used open source software when I was figuring things out at home on my home PC. Like I think my dad brought home like an old computer. I think our first computer was like a Commodore
Well, I was going to
64.
say, what's your first computer?
Yeah, okay, great. So
C64.
yeah,
Got it.
Commodore 64 was the first. I had it, bunny ears to a black and white television. That was the only way you could see it. It was like this massive, heavy thing.
Yes.
Um, my parents didn't know what to do with it. They're like, give it to this kid. He'll figure it
Hand
out.
it to Rob.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And then I think we found some old business system, like, I don't know, maybe the library was shutting down, garage sale. I don't know. We ended up with a Commodore 128, which
Okay.
had dual 5 1/4 floppy drive. So you
Oh,
could
now you're talking.
copy and run multi-disk software. And I think
Yes.
the command line to start an application, and this had its own monitor. It was
Mm.
orange and black.
Yes.
It wasn't a TV anymore. It was a real monitor. And I think the command line was like, like 120 characters, right? Just to like open anything.
Yeah.
Um, and so I've always been fascinated with technology and computers, and systems and technology. So uh, I had a passion for aviation as well. So I started my career in the aviation industry,
Okay.
which is a combination of mechanical and electrical and information systems. And so, but talk about an industry that doesn't move very fast. The aviation one does not move very fast. So I think I wasn't totally satisfied there. Plus, in 2008, 2009, we had some economic factors that really slowed down the aviation industry. So I was transitioning in my career, and I was working for a Caterpillar company on the power generation side. And so, when I joke that I found my first data center through the generator yard, I really did. One of my
Yeah.
first projects was working at a Cisco data center, and I walked into the data center hall, and I was just totally fascinated. I was like, okay, how did all this get here? Who's using it? And it's just in this big concrete room that no one knows about.
Yeah.
People drive by it every day, and
Wouldn't
nobody has
know.
any
Wouldn't
idea.
know. Yeah.
So I kind of got like the sense that I'm seeing something that not a lot of other people get to see. And for some reason, that was interesting to me too.
For the Wizard of Oz, you're just peering behind the curtain a bit.
Yeah, a little
Yeah.
bit. So, so then I've taken multiple roles within the industry. mainly on the electrical side. I then was into modular data centers, and that
Mm,
really gave me exposure to the Open Compute project and really a segment of the market that's not standardized, is doing things differently than traditional infrastructure. So OCP really became a home for me to how do we
sure.
take these traditional things, put them into different form factor, tackle different environmental and deployment challenges. And so I became a participant and a volunteer lead within OCP and got to meet a lot of other people doing similar things in their own right, whether it be a traditional data center, but with new cooling technology or new servers. And just, I just got so much exposure to the industry where people were willing to share what they knew and what they saw the problems the industry had that, I was hooked on OCP no matter what segment of the industry I was in.
Yeah.
So then just in the last 2 years, talking more seriously about being at multiple OCP companies within the ecosystem and understanding how OCP works and how it impacts the data center industry. I had made friends with multiple people in the foundation, and they were kind of like, if you came here, you could work with all the OCP companies. And I said, well, that's a pretty compelling argument. So
Yeah.
um, spring last year, I joined full time, and it's been very exciting to join a lot of conversations and be part of discussions about what the future of computational infrastructure looks like. Is just an opportunity that I never thought I'd have. So it's been great.
That's no, that's awesome. I think, I came across you on another podcast at some point, maybe end of last year or mid last year or something. And we need more people like you. So people who see things through different lenses, from on the sustainability front, the cost effective front, on the standard front. I think and you're in the right place, at the right time with OCP, because it's really, it's a grassroots movement to change things, fundamentally, that's been always done a certain way, and that's ripe for disruption and innovation. Anything that's been, kind of pretty standardly unstandard, and been doing
Yeah.
something, for whatever reason, the same way for a long time, for the most part, is ready to make some changes and get better. So
Well, thank
it's
you very much.
yeah.
If I look back, and it's always easier to look at things retroactively, right? But at the time of investing so much in being in the aviation industry and being these systems, and it's so specific, and this is what you're meant to do, and this is what your career path looks like, and this is, you can start to feel like, oh, I'm in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Mm,
Like it really, it could be very discouraging. And then it's turned out to be just a total blessing, and that it turned into that wrong place got me to the right place pretty quickly. At least it feels like the right place. And so, yeah, I'm just really excited and happy to be here and just be part of it. It's like building a whole industry again. And now with everybody really ramping up with AI and new cooling technologies, and I would say focused more on the right things and not just growth for growth's sake, but
mm.
growing in the right way. I feel very, very fortunate to be here.
Yeah. Well, this is almost gleaning out some career advice there. If you don't like something you're doing, or instead of finding the thing you want to do, find out what you don't like, and then either do the opposite or just find something
Yeah.
adjacent.
Yeah, try more things, I would say. Don't get narrowly focused too early. And to anybody who's listening who's like, maybe just there's one person listening to this podcast that's like, what's a
That's
data
actually
center?
probably the total viewership.
Okay, of the many that I hope view your podcast, hopefully one of them, even if it's just one of them, is like maybe they stumble on it because they're like, "What's a data center?"
Yeah.
Because I think we take it for granted. If you've been in the space even for a little bit of time, I quickly start to assume that everybody knows what a data center is now.
Mm,
And then as you see it on the news about, how now Nvidia is impacting the stock market and things like it's really becoming mainstream. I'm starting to realize that no, everybody doesn't, just because I've been in it for some time now, people still don't know about the data center industry.
correct.
So if they're here, like there are so many spaces for people to come into the data center industry. Like it's so broad. It's not, maybe my perception over 10 years ago was like, you know, old IBM photos of guys with pocket protectors, and like standing over a schematic for the next chip or board they're going to make. Like, and that's what this industry is. And it's not. It's marketing, it's sales, it's construction, it's, certainly there are those electrical and computer engineering that is a huge part of our industry, but it's such a diverse perspective from opportunity that, if the economy changes or you're not happy in your role or you're somewhere else, like there's probably a place for you in the data center industry.
Totally, totally. I
And we
think,
need it. We need it
yeah,
badly.
I think anyone that's curious, right? Like you just have a curiosity and you're hungry to learn, and think about problems and solve them in unique, not even unique ways, but it's always funny. I worked at Amazon for a time, and so I did a ton of interviews, like 100, 250 interviews, and so as you would go through interviewing some of these folks, you would find out very quickly whether they knew something or not. But sometimes it didn't matter what they knew, it's how they got through those problems. So,
Hmm.
that the way someone tackles a problem they have no idea about. And so you can ask some pretty interesting questions to sort of tease some of that stuff out. But the unique part of someone solving a problem that they don't know, they have no, skin in the game on, is they're going to have that problem in their day job. They're going to have that problem in their career. And, you want folks that are thinking not necessarily differently, but just, logically, to get through problems, know when and how to escalate or look for help, ask good questions, and
Yeah,
essentially getting to that outcome, without any experience, or getting to the 80%, is pretty impressive. And if you can find those folks, uh, and or the ability for them to have that curiosity as well. They may not know the answer, but you watch that curiosity go off and, study and come back prepared the next day, the next week, the next month, for a follow-up. It's those folks that you want in your team. So, uh,
absolutely.
yeah.
And those folks need to not be afraid to, like, continue to be curious and ask questions. And I think the biggest mistake I made early was like assuming how much of this was figured out already. Talk
Mm,
about an industry where like we still have a lot to figure out. Like, so you can't, nobody has all the answers. Like, we need the people who are figuring those things out. And, quick plug for, I think ours, I think there's some great organizations that are doing things to help either those who are early in their career, from an educational standpoint, starting their career, like Nomad Futurist,
mm,
and Nabil and that team are awesome. The Infrastructure Masons also have their educational efforts as well, which are fantastic. And then even things that are, OCP is not, we don't have a dedicated area around education, but it doesn't have to be. Like, all of our calls are public and open. You don't have to be a
absolutely.
member to join our calls. So if there's an area within the data center infrastructure that you're curious about, our call calendar is public. You don't have, we're not going to make you like say your name and be like, hi, I want to join and learn about this. Like, you could just lurch or listen to a recording. If you don't want to join a live call or you want, all our recordings are posted online on Wiki. So you just go to opencompute.org and you can get immersed or at least get access to some of the information for free, like
Yeah.
from your computer, from your phone. So
So
I encourage anybody who's curious to do it.
we'll be publishing Rob's cell number at the end of this podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. Call me, email rob at
Personal,
opencompute.org.
very good.
Send me an
Personal home
email.
address, and no, it's awesome. It's by nature it's open, and you guys, practice what you preach. So it's and the folks and the companies surrounding and the community surrounding OCP are doing the same, which is great.
I think
Tons of
we,
good folks.
I think we do it, and it's just fortunate. I think the nature of our purpose and what we're about, that we attract people who share in that vision and know that working together and being collaborative is a better way forward.
Mm,
And so our community is just chock full of people who are willing to share, willing to work together, and it creates a really great environment to be a part of.
awesome. Well, Rob, what didn't I ask you, my friend? Is there anything scoop worthy? I'm not a journalist, but is there anything of that you're interested in, wanting to share, or like what does the future of OCP look like for the remainder of 24 and beyond and 25? Like what if a crystal ball, what do you
Yeah,
say?
I think we're gonna see a lot of more and go faster through the end of the
Okay.
year. I think if anybody's questioning like how long is this hype cycle gonna last, I see no indication of anything slowing down. Um, for those who aren't familiar with, like, when you decide to set out to build a data center, like, it takes years, right?
Years.
You have to acquire the land, acquire the power. So these things that are set in motion are going to exist for some time. They have to play out. And so for at a minimum, we know there's many years of growth and expansion. We're focused on a couple key things. At OCP, we have a strategic initiative around AI hardware. And what does that mean? Not just, and I guess at a rack scale is how we're looking at it, systems level, not just the chips, but
Absolutely.
how does this impact multiple things that connect to these GPUs and to these systems that consume way more power and produce way more heat, and then what to do with that heat. Like, so we're putting together a group that is looking at this from multiple disciplines, from the physical infrastructure side, from the rack level stuff, cooling, things of that nature. So at the same time, we're focused on that. We're working on kind of really putting a system level design together, or at least making sure we're covering all the gaps in the technology. Historically, OCP has been very component level focused, right? We develop a new server, we develop a new rack, and then can we bump into the next thing? We're kind of trying to zoom out a little bit, and how do these
Mm.
things work together? And I'm really excited because I think there's a lot of untapped potential and resources within OCP already, within our database, that just, it hasn't, all the dots haven't been connected.
Yeah.
Many of them have, but not completely. So I'm really excited to see what that produces. Hopefully, we have some great announcements in October at our global summit in San Jose, California. The other big piece that I'm really focused on today is our alliance with the Infrastructure Masons on a
Okay.
focus on the iMasons Climate Accord. We've been hearing from the iMasons community and the OCP community multiple times, and even before I became a member of the foundation team, just as a member of both groups, of these two groups should really work together. I'm hearing this at OCP, like 2, 3 years ago, like in liquids. Well, they're working on liquids. Well, we're working on sustainability. Well, they should really start to get
Yeah.
aligned. How do we connect those dots? So I've worked with Miranda Gardner, who's the executive leader over the iMasons Climate Accord, and their team over there, and really some fantastic volunteers, Alex Rakow at Schneider Electric, and really pulled it together. Like, how do we pull these two groups together? And we're able to do so this spring. And then we announced it at Regional Summit. And our focus is going to be around carbon disclosure. And
Okay.
that's the full stack. Like, every piece of hardware, every piece of carbon that's going to go into building a data center, how do we label it? How do we understand what's in our data centers? And then we can make informed, then we hope that that information will allow people to make informed decisions about how they build the future and understand trade-offs, and just, have a better understanding of what their carbon footprint is, because it's a little bit better than a guess right now for many people and many organizations. And so we're starting out with collecting that data and trying to standardize on how that information is collected. And then we're hoping that that will enable things like a carbon label, like a nutrition label for hardware
I
that goes in data
I love
centers.
I love that. I mean, I love it for the reasons for visibility and transparency. Because I think you take a flight today, right? The data center industry uses far more power than the airline industry, but no one talks about that, right?
Right.
It's kind of crazy. You go book flights on Google Flights, and you have your CO2 kind of impact. You
Right.
don't do that when you spin up compute, or when you build a data center, or when you buy a chip, or when your laptop at home or whatever. There's no nutritional information that says, oh, that's got some saturated fat, you should probably stay away.
Right. And
And so it's great.
I can be empathetic to the manufacturers. It hasn't been solved, and it's not simple because it's not an easy problem to
Oh, for
solve.
sure. It's incredibly complex.
But we don't have standardization in that area, right? We don't have companies using the same standards of how they track their carbon, at what level, upstream, downstream. I've been very fortunate to be around an awesome group of sustainability professionals that work in our industry, that are, explaining what the problems are within their companies, from the vendor side, from the consumer side, hyperscale, enterprise, all of it. So we're getting all these voices together saying, here's my problems, here's our challenges. So the most important thing is that we start. And so by bringing these two groups together, saying, all right, we've picked a thing we're going to start on. And our hope is that we're going to build a bunch of great things like this, like when maybe someday in the future that you can, make a comparative analysis between two pieces of hardware. And then maybe you could project out, like, if I have all this compute in my data center today and I go to replace it, what's the trade-off from a efficiency perspective, the embodied carbon perspective, like
Sure.
all those things that people have talked about that I think are very important and are great concepts, don't happen unless we standardize the measurement first. So that's where we're starting, and we're already making great progress. Those calls are also open. It doesn't matter if you're part of iMasons or OCP. Those calls are public. We want more people to join that too. That will help us move faster. That will help us be more impactful. So that's
Right.
the other thing I'm really excited about, and excited to hear what that group produces by October, and then a bit of a roadmap of what we'll see in the coming years.
Awesome. What's your view on, I mean, we've obviously got the sustainability regulation it's been talked about is sort of spotting, it's the application is spotty at I wouldn't say at best, but it's spotty depending on the, country you're in. The data centers have been blocked from being built in certain countries due to moratoriums based on, efficiencies. Others, there's regulation on AI, which has an impact on sort of some of these things because AI is using so much power, and the efficiencies there are kind of hard to justify. In Ireland, there was some high density apartment buildings and low income housing being built that was pushed out 10 years because they didn't have the power, because
All right.
this 20+% in Ireland is really disproportionately powering data centers. And so it's a really big topic, the sustainability regulation and kind of power supply and distribution. I mean, there's few options left other than going down the nuclear path to get the supply that and the sustainability to some degree functions of the energy, because if the rain don't rain and the wind don't wind,
Right.
there's a challenge on renewables for and storage to use it 24/7. So there's a lot to unpack there, but like what are your thoughts on how that progresses in a meaningful way forward? I mean,
Yeah.
standards I think is a part of it.
Yeah. It's a huge challenge that I think everybody now accepts is coming, right? Or they're facing it acutely today, right? Like in Northern Virginia, they're facing it. I think recently, and Salt Lake City is facing
Mhm.
it, right? So even secondary markets are like we have the power, we just can't get it to you, right? Is
Yeah.
somewhat where we are today. And now we're fairly confident that we're going to multiply the existing infrastructure very quickly over the next couple of years. So this problem is just going to be exacerbated. In the very short term, I think there's a lot of opportunity on the cooling front. I think we use 30 to 40% of the energy to cool these data centers. If you can reduce that overhead on the cooling infrastructure, you can use more of that energy for compute. I think that's a
Absolutely.
huge opportunity. I think there's using our own technology, like um, you know, like analysis of these data centers, leveraging AI to use things like digital twins
Absolutely.
and reduce stranded capacity in existing infrastructure in the short term are great opportunities. The data center industry has been a huge proponent and have put their money where their mouth is on renewables. They've developed far more renewables, I think, than any other industry. But they're not going to do it alone. I think there's some talk of behind the meter cogeneration, on-site generation. I think that will probably exist in the short term. Things like natural gas will probably be part of the short-term picture. Beyond that, it's going to have to be it's a highly regulated space, energy.
Mm.
Um, and I'm kind of speaking, U.S. centric. It's even harder in other markets. But from the US perspective, those regulators and those utility providers are going to have to become part of the conversations where, you know, I think most of the time it was after the fact, like, okay, here's our power contract, like, here's what it's going to cost. That's the
Mm.
focus. Like, how it gets there and how it's being used is, kind of secondary. I think that's going to be more of the discussion. And I think we'll be chasing power probably for a while. I don't
Oh,
think
yeah. I think
there's no magic wand.
Yeah, no, I think you're speaking my language. I think all of those things entirely, plus one to everything you just said. I think the what I've been encouraged about is big oil's interest and the decarbonization of their businesses and their involvement. Ultimately, you walk at the conferences and you see BP, Shell, Castrol,
Sure.
you're interacting with them and they're supplying the fluids, they're engineering to meet certain electrical and thermal properties and sort of environments that these chips are needed in, and really working, hand in glove with chip manufacturers, OEMs, and the advanced cooling suppliers. And that's again encouraging to see both that the interest and the investment to just again create better solutions there, because that ultimately it's good for them and it's good for everyone. So it's
I think so. I do think it does raise some eyebrows when you see companies like BP and Shell and others that are, oil companies, right, are how they're referred to. But they've done a lot. They've done a lot to discuss what they're doing in energy as a whole. I charge my electric vehicle at a Shell energy station, right? So not all the time, but it does happen. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, I think those companies are energy companies, though the majority of it, probably comes from oil to some extent. But the thing that really surprised me about those companies is that they're the consumers of the technology.
hmm,
Those companies have been using high performance compute and cutting edge cooling technologies and silicon and other things to better understand their business um, long before many other companies that we're familiar with are. Those are companies that you don't expect that were
totally.
really using this technology.
Well, you mentioned it before, digital twins of oil rigs, and working out the maintenance and how to operate those safely and efficiently. Fantastic use case, right? Like all of
Yeah.
that
So
modeling and simulation work needs a lot of compute.
yeah. So I think if the data center industry I think there's a lot of opportunity for those companies to consume the offerings of the data center industry and become a participant in it. And if that helps steer things in a new direction that is, more sustainable and better for everybody, I think that's a good thing on the whole. So, yeah, I mean, we had we had a lot of vendors that are from the oil and gas industry traditionally at our last OCP summit, and people are chatting in the hallways like, "Oh, that's interesting." And it's really come to surprise me that how much of a consumer of our industry they are. And I think that we'll see more of it. I won't be surprised.
Absolutely. Awesome, Rob. Anything else you wanted to talk about and bring up, or anything I didn't ask you, anything of interest that you're sitting like sitting on and you're just waiting to tell someone?
I, you know, I no, I think I've shared. What's nice is being in the open is as I get to let that valve off almost
Yeah,
every day. Like, oh, this is a new interesting thing. Somebody should be working on this. And in our space, it's better for it to be out in the open. It's more
totally.
likely it's going to happen. It'll happen quicker. It'll happen better because more people have seen it and done it. So um, I'm even further removed. Though I've been an OCP participant for a long time, I've done it as a within the business sense of leading individual businesses with their own goals. Um, OCP is something I'm fascinated with and continue to be very passionate about. I think it is a way that we're going to solve these big technological challenges around densification, around AI, for many reasons we already talked about.
Yeah.
I think it's key in sustainability and building far more sustainable infrastructure. You talked about decommissioning a little bit on the liquid side. Like, what are we going to do? Most of these hyperscalers have talked about holding onto their hardware longer,
Yes.
um, but also growing and also deploying brand new technology. That's going to be interesting to see what we do with that hardware in the future. But no, I think it's all at the open and it's there for anybody to consume. So uh, please come to the opencompute.org website. Take a look around. If you have questions, feel free to reach out and I'll connect you to the right people. Far smarter and more experts that I have access to than ever before, and
It's
they're happy to
awesome.
share.
No, that's great. I appreciate your time today, Rob. It's a pleasure talking to you. It's great to learn more about OCP. Hopefully, folks got to learn more about what the team is doing, what you're doing with it, and then all of the contributing members as well. So I can check out the website, contact you via your personal cell phone
Yeah,
number, and
LinkedIn's great,
no, I'm
email's
just
great.
yeah,
Yeah,
and contact you, and I'm happy to point in the right direction as well if folks want to hit up me or otherwise. But there's also I do some recaps for OCP. I think it's a fantastic conference that's done twice a year, the global and the regional summit. And hopefully we'll see you in person there in October, otherwise beforehand. But anyway, in the meantime, Rob, great to catch up. Awesome talking to you, and thanks for sharing everything today.
Nick, thanks so much.